Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and welcome to First Draft, where I speak with journalists and authors about their important work. Every day, we talk about the fire hose of news that's coming out of Washington, D.C., and it is everything from special addresses from Donald Trump to lots of hearings on the Hill on his revolving door of cabinet officials like Pete Hegseth. Luckily, we have people like Eric Michael Garcia in the trenches who are ready to break down all of that news and report what we need to know. Eric is the Washington bureau chief with The Independent, and he's also the author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. And he joins us now to talk with us about the latest news out of DC. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to finally meet you. You're one of those people who I've been reading for years and occasionally talking to on social media. And I know that you have been... Thank you. I know your days are extremely busy, and you have been covering all of the goings on both on Capitol Hill and the Trump administration. Can we start with the, mystery surrounding the former Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who has been out due to medical issues for more than a month, causing a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. It seems to me there's a lot that we don't know about this situation, and we've been filling in the details with a lot of speculation and some conspiracy theories. But what do we need to know? What do we know right now?
The most important thing that you need to know, and you need to know about when it comes to any senator, is it's just one less vote. Republicans have 53 Senate seats. That gives them the ability to confirm President Trump's nominees. That gives them the ability to confirm. That gives them the ability to vote for his legislation. That gives them the ability to anything to pass the agenda. Right now, they are in the process of trying to pass a stopgap spending bill before the midterm elections. This is in raw politics policy, up and down. It means now that there are 52 Senate seats. Mm-hmm. And for a little bit, Republicans had 51 Senate seats after the death of Senator Lindsey Graham.
Right.
So there's that. I think the other important thing with Senator McConnell that I think is incredibly important is that yesterday, of course, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee. The thing that I was really focused on was the fact that Senator McConnell is, for those who don't know, he's the chairman of the subcommittee on appropriations for defense, meaning he's in charge of writing the budget for the military. And I think that's incredibly important because combined with the death of Senator Graham and combined with the death of, the absence of Senator McConnell, that means that there are two fewer Republicans who support Ukraine, who support defense in Europe. Mm-hmm. A lot of Republicans now don't think that much about Ukraine, or in fact adamantly opposed to providing aid for Ukraine. So there's that element. There's just the other fact that they had to write a budget. They had to come up with all these things. And for those who forget, Senator McConnell voted against Secretary Hegseth's confirmation, largely because he didn't buy into Secretary Hegseth's whole comments about war fighters and lethality and all that. McConnell is very much a vestige of the old, I guess you'd say, interventionist, robust foreign policy, but not like the, I guess you could say, kill them all and let God sort them out style of bellicosity.
Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of pressure mounting from some of the Democratic base on Kentucky's Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, to appoint a successor or to start a fight over this. Now, what I find interesting about this debate is that Kentucky is largely Republican dominated, and years ago, when Andy Beshear, became governor, which shocked a lot of people since he's a Democrat, they quickly rushed in a law that requires him to appoint a member of the same party as the person who,
yes,
would be needing to be replaced for whatever reason. Looking ahead, Mitch McConnell is of advanced age. Clearly, this was a scenario that they had in mind. And so it's not so easy for Andy Beshear to just appoint a Democrat. He could start a fight, but I know that MAGA, and Trump, they're very good at taking on the system and trying to break it. That's clearly not what Democrats tend to do. And not being a lawyer, it does seem like the law is fairly simple, and I'm not sure how they'd prevail in court. But more than that, just the idea of him appointing a successor if he followed the law, that would be giving Republicans 53 votes when they currently only have 52. So I understand this mentality. A lot of Democrats are like, do something, fight back. We've got to check Trump and fight fire with fire. But on this procedural hardball, is this a fight that Democrats can win?
There is no fight that they can win. There is none. Because, Governor Beshear has said that he disputes the constitutionality of the law that Kentucky legislature has passed. But the question is, does he want to set up potentially being impeached? Does he want to set up, a whole drawn out process by the Kentucky legislature? And I think we should also note that Mitch McConnell basically built the Kentucky Republican Party. Until McConnell came along, Kentucky was overwhelmingly a Democratic state. Very much those old Appalachian coal miner labor Democrats, who a lot of white bougie liberals who sip lattes don't like anymore. But there really is. There is not a win scenario for Beshear by picking a fight on this. The closest thing he could do is keep the seat open if Senator McConnell passes. And then there's a whole other kettle of fish there. But even then, McConnell's term expires at the end of the year. He's going to be replaced by Representative Andy Barr, who won the Republican nomination for Senate, who had President Trump's endorsement. So there really is kind of a why pick a fight on this when the conclusion's already foregone.
Well, so I'm curious why this has emerged as some sort of a litmus test on Andy Beshear's political future, because he's been mentioned as a potential 2028 presidential candidate. He was mentioned as a potential vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris in 2024. Is this an indication of where the Democratic base is heading, where they kind of want these maximalist solutions regardless of practicality sometimes?
What was that phrase that Donald Trump's administration used? Maximum warfare everywhere all the time. That is where the Democratic voting base is at this time. They want blood. And I think you see this with how Democratic voters are voting for socialists in states not just like New York City, not just in Colorado, but they could very well elect a socialist in Wisconsin. They could for their governor's nominee. They could elect a left-wing DSA-ish kind of candidate in Michigan.
Right. Abdul Sayed pointedly said he's not a socialist, which I thought was an interesting distinction for him to make.
That is a very interesting distinction. So, but the point being is that Democratic voters right now feel that their elected officials have not, quote unquote, met the moment. I don't know what the hell that means. I think meeting the moment means you do whatever I want you to do. It's a meaningless term. But, at the end of the day, there are certain rules are rules, laws are laws. And, at the end of the day, keeping the seat, if Mitch McConnell is not present to confirm Todd Blanche, wouldn't that be okay for Democrats? Because then it just comes down to Tom Tillis and John Cornyn.
Right. Which, is interesting to put pressure on two guys who literally have nothing to lose,
Who literally, one of them said, peace out, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. And the other one, Trump stabbed in the back.
Right. Yeah. So that's an interesting dynamic, and we've seen this Democratic base anger that really propelled Graham Platner's candidacy in Maine. He finally was forced to withdraw after sexual assault allegations. And it seems like the party is unified around Troy Jackson, and they're putting the pieces back together because they desperately want to knock off Susan Collins. But I know that when you were covering Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, you asked him about the Platner issue recently, and also some allegations against members of his caucus. And I think we have that footage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eric Garcia, Independent. These past 2 weeks, Democrats ditched Graham Platner from their ballot after sexual assault allegations. 2 members of the conference, Max Miller and Corey Mills, faced domestic violence allegations. Why would you Republicans keep them in the conference, whereas Democrats are dropping somebody accused of criminally accused of sexual harassment?
Well, the key word there is allegation. We have a process here. The House Ethics Committee works on those things. If allegations are made, they work through a process. So I'm not in the business of commenting on investigations as they're in process, and we'll see how that shakes out. That's how this always works. And by the way, it's done for R's and D's on both sides of the aisle. Yes, ma'am.
What's your sense of how that controversy will end up playing out in the House?
It's very difficult. I mean, I think a lot of Republican women don't like Corey Mills. Representative Nancy Mace has been trying to kick him out. We could talk about Nancy Mace later. Representative Ana Paulina Luna is not a fan of Corey Mills, and I think that's part of it. Also, of course, Representative Max Miller is going through a divorce trial, and there are a divorce case, and there are allegations that he abused his ex-wife. There are allegations that he might have hurt his. And I'm going to be very careful here, but there, I believe, are rumors that he either did it in front of his child or maybe put his hands on his child, but I don't want to say specifically, for legal reasons, obviously. But the fact of the matter is that this is not the first time that Speaker Johnson has essentially effectively given his members of Congress a pass. For those who don't remember, earlier this year, Representative Tony Gonzalez from Texas was under a lot of criticism for having an inappropriate affair with a former staffer who set herself on fire and killed herself. We don't know if it was related to the affair, but the screenshots came out that he was asking for new sexy pictures of her, things like that. He eventually admitted, copped to having an affair. It began an ethics committee investigation, and the only thing that led to Tony Gonzalez resigning was Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from California, resigning because of a rape allegation.
Right.
It's important to remember that Speaker Johnson and the House Republicans have a very, very thin majority, and they don't want to see, they can't afford really any defections or resignations. The fact of the matter is that right now there's still a vacancy from Tony Gonzalez's seat. There is still, but that, to borrow from Ocasio-Cortez, that investigation around Tony Gonzalez and those allegations were festering for months. And they only gave him the boot once Democrats got rid of one of theirs.
Right.
So it is. I mean, and the allegations. I believe there's an order from a court on Corey Mills in contacting his ex-partner. There were allegations that there was an investigation. It looks like, according to some news reports, he's under investigation by the Department of Justice. And in the same case, Max Miller faces 2 abuse charges from 2 separate people. One, his ex-wife, and former White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham.
Well, I don't want to idealize the past because, yes, we have stereotypes that Democrats and Republicans used to go out for beers together all the time and everything was great before Trump. And certainly, the history is a lot more complicated and there's always been partisan tangling and double standards. But, decades ago, Democrats and Republicans, I think, were a little better at policing their own than they are now. I remember the Bob Packwood allegations decades ago. and he was forced out. That was something that even women's groups got on board for, and he was a reliable pro-choice vote. That was a hard vote for them to lose, and certainly there are no more pro-choice votes in the Republican Party at this point. No. But we've seen this under Trump with his behavior, how the everything goes ethos has kind of started to infect the Republican Party. But we saw that at play with Graham Platner as well. He survived scandal after scandal with his Nazi tattoo, his Reddit posts, other allegations for women before, finally enough was enough. Is this just modern politics? Is this just the way things are in both parties now?
I don't want to believe that they are, but the evidence is pretty clear. Just this week, I believe, former Representative Tim Murphy passed away. He was, for those who don't remember, he had an affair with, I believe, the former staffer, and that was what led to his resignation. That was pushed out by, he was a Republican member of Congress. He was pushed out by Paul Ryan. I always point out that in the speaker's lobby on Capitol Hill, there's a lot. It's kind of where people can talk. There's a fireplace, things like that. There's all the portraits of a lot of the former speakers. When Dennis Hastert was arrested for paying hush money for somebody he allegedly molested, former House Speaker Paul Ryan removed his portrait from the speaker's lobby because that was considered, no, we are not going to honor a child molester. And I think that there are a lot of Democrats who don't like the fact that they have to, I guess you could say, clean up their own mess and take out their own trash, whereas Republicans kind of let a lot of things go on. And I think that was a big reason why people allowed Graham Platner to stay on as long as he did. I remember Bernie Sanders got really mad with me when I asked him about the tattoo, and he's like, I care only about 50,000 Americans dying from lack of health care. Okay? Like, you're worried about a tattoo? And I was like, but what about the Reddit post about sexual assault? He's like, have you ever been on 4 tours of duty in Iraq? And I was just like, no, I haven't. He's like, okay. And he got really pissy with me. And then it was the next day I see him in the basement of the Senate. I put my phone in my pocket. I'm like, I'm not talking to him. And I've always had a good relationship with Bernie. And then he came up to me and he's like, I'm sorry I got angry with you. But it was one of those things because, like, for the love of God, Elizabeth Warren endorsed him after the tattoo. Right. After the Reddit post, called him my kind of man. So they're absolutely, I think there's the standard. I think our pain tolerance as a whole has increased. One person who I should say, though, who did not endorse Mr. Platner was you know where I'm going with this, was Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes. Which, is a distinguisher for her amongst her DSA colleagues going into 2028.
Correct, absolutely, yes.
And that was something that was very interesting to me. And
it was very interesting when I would talk with her about Graham Platner.
Yeah, and you've been reporting on her a lot in terms of her critiques about ICE. And especially with the incident with one of the killings in Maine and all of the protests against Susan Collins, who's, of course, vulnerable and up for re-election. Talk with us about, it seems like her messaging on ICE has been very clear, and she has been able to win over a lot of people who never would say the words, abolish ICE.
Right.
But she's been a pretty effective messenger on that issue, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally just me hanging around on the steps of the Capitol and just saying, hey, I'm going to talk to Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. The funny thing about that is that earlier in the day, I had run into Senator Collins, who, of course, is the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, which, again, means she writes the budget. The thing that I asked, I was like, what do you make of the fact at that time the administration was going to pause ICE doing these kind of vehicle stops, like the type that killed Mr. Sagalo Araujo in Houston, and that killed Mr. John Sebastian Guerrero in Biddeford, Maine. And she says, well, I'm glad that they paused it. And then she says, I was the one who got them more body cameras and more training and more all those things. And I think that Senator Collins recognizes that this is a problem, that this is something that a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, tie to her. Because she is a Republican in the Trump administration. I mean, remember, she voted to confirm Mark Wayne Mullen. Before that, she voted to confirm Kristi Noem. She has voted to confirm Pam Bondi. And we'll see how she votes on Todd Blanche. So rightly or wrongly, a lot of people, and she's voted for these appropriation spending bills, these reconciliation bills. So a lot of people associated with that. And I think her argument is that, well, I'm the one who put in these kind of, I guess you could say, safeguards around ICE. And so when I ran into represent, and I think that's the argument that she's making, is that I'm the one who's trying to like put these guardrails around ICE. Whereas like when I talk with Representative Ocasio-Cortez, she says, look, she's still the one who wrote the checks. She's still the one who wrote the budget. And what was funny about that was when I did that and I tweeted out those videos from Representative Ocasio-Cortez, about my chats with Representative Ocasio-Cortez, what was interesting was that Democratic candidates for Senate in Maine, I don't think Troy Jackson did, but Nirav Shah and Dan Claiborne certainly did. They quote tweeted those videos and they said, AOC is right. We don't need more of Susan Collins's concern shtick. And I think that is, to me, reflective of the fact that a lot of Americans just don't trust ICE anymore. They don't see ICE as enforcing immigration laws. They see it as a rogue law enforcement agency that has broad authority to murder people in the streets.
Right. And in fact, Tom Homan has said, if you comply, don't worry about it. If you don't, you get what you get.
You get what you get, yeah. And unfortunately, what we get is not a $50,000 bag full of kava, but a kava bag with $50,000 in it. But we don't talk about that. But yeah, I mean, and we should remember that Tom Homan, and I'm not going to defend Tom Homan here, but he is, I guess you could say, a little less zealous than Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem. They were the zealots. So, but yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of Americans just don't trust ICE anymore. A Economist YouGov poll that came out, I believe, yesterday showed that 48% of Americans support abolishing ICE.
That's an incredible number. And, I know that you've done so much interesting work looking at Latino voters, and so many of them did vote for Donald Trump in 2024, but that has been a huge point of weakness for the Republican Party in light of ICE's tactics. Talk to us about what we can expect this fall.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think that Latino voters are facing a double barrel. I think that we forget that they are one of the Democratic, if not the major group, but the group, but if not one of the biggest ones, biggest ethnic minority that is least likely to go to college and graduate with a 4-year degree. They are largely working class. I mean, I think about like my family. I'm a first generation college graduate. A lot of my cousins are first gen themselves, but they're largely working class. A lot of my family members didn't go to college. A lot of people they're small business owners. They are people who are affected largely by the cost of living. And it was funny. I spoke with the chairwoman of the Webb County Democratic Party after the 2024 election. And she said, somebody told her in Spanish, yo voy a votar por Trump porque Trump va a darme dinero, which is to say, I'm voting for Trump because he's going to give me money. And I think a lot of Latino voters, rightly or wrongly, had an idealized version of the Trump presidency when before COVID, when the economy was good, and when COVID was and when COVID hit, they remember him giving stimulus checks, and I think they wanted it. Right, yeah, with his name on them, and Joe Biden said it was stupid for me not to do the same thing, and so I think there's that, and then on top of that, and there is also the fact that a lot of them are afraid of their loved ones being deported, and it's not just in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. It's in places like New Jersey, and it's in places like Maine, and it's in places like Houston, Texas. The point that I've always made is that like there are actually, I think, more Hispanics in Houston, Texas than there are in the Rio Grande Valley. Just population. So I think that Hispanic voters and Latino voters are dealing with not only the prospect, the very real prospect of their loved ones being deported and their loved ones being stopped or detained by ICE or whatever, but they're also dealing with the bottom line. It's more expensive to live. It's more expensive, and look, who pays more when there's inflation? The rich people are going to be fine. They can absorb inflation. Big corporations, they can absorb inflation. It is it's working. It's single moms who clip coupons, or who go to the gas station every day and every day the war in Iran goes up. Crude was up to $90 a barrel this week.
Right.
They're the ones who filling up their tank, and they realize, hey, look, it costs a little bit more to drive your kids to soccer practice. It is your tío and your tía who run who run a taqueria. They realize that, okay, it costs more for gas to load up the truck to get all the supplies. It costs more to get the avocados from Mexico. It costs more to get the tomatoes from Mexico to make the guacamole. This is not just hypothetical for them. It is bread and butter. It is the ability to provide for your family and provide a good life for your family, which I think is not just a Hispanic value, but is an American value. But I think for a lot of Hispanic Americans, at least how I grew up, it's a source of pride to be able to provide for your family.
Right. And I know something that Republicans and Trump and right-wing media has been effective at is messaging in, especially, doing Spanish language ads and media aimed at voters. And that seemed to be a weak spot for Democrats in 24. Is that something that they're finally catching up on, or is that still a blind spot?
It was really fascinating. I think, like everybody else, I was watching the World Cup a lot. And it was funny because for the first time, I was seeing Democratic ads in Spanish. We watch Telemundo. You should only watch the World Cup at Telemundo, even if you don't speak Spanish. It's just more fun. But I saw Democratic ads, and I see I was looking at my social media feed, a lot of Democratic candidates, whether it was Katie Hobbs in Arizona or James Talarico in Texas, they ran ads during the World Cup and Espanol. I kind of joked with a friend of mine. I was like, look, James Talarico needs Ricardo Pepi to endorse him. Ricardo Pepi is part of the men's national team and is from Texas, and Weston McKinney. But I think it is something. I think that a lot of Democrats recognize that they can't do what Jorge Ramos says, have Christopher Columbus syndrome, where Democratic voters or Democratic politicians or Republican politicians, for that matter, just in the last final months of the election, oh my God, I discovered Latino voters. We need to just do, we need to do just one ad in Spanish and do it in October and move on. I think you've seen it across stripes. You see it whether it's, I guess you could say, a mainstream Democrat like James Talarico in Texas, but also you see Mayor Zohran Mamdani in New York City heavily reaching out to the Hispanic community, and that's why he did significantly better with Hispanics and really what boosted him was his support among Hispanic voters. I think you see this in places like California as well, and so I think it's when I text Democratic operatives who are Hispanic, they say it's getting better, but it's not what we want, obviously.
One conversation that we had offline about some of the success that DSA candidates have had, whether it's Mamdani in New York, AOC, of course, when she knocked off Crowley in 2018, or Bernie Sanders, his success, for instance, in like the Nevada caucuses. Latino voters were such a key part of the coalition, and oftentimes that is the factor in why some of these Democratic Socialists win and the others don't. We have a huge test of their power coming up in the Michigan U.S. Senate primary.
Yes.
Michigan is not a state that has, as big of a Latino population as other states. I'm curious what kind of factor you're seeing that might play if that is not a good sign for El Sayed. Of course, we have a larger Arab American population than any other state, so that's another factor, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and also Michigan has some of the biggest public universities in the country. Between both between Michigan State and University of Michigan, so you have a very young population, which is interesting because Michigan as a whole is an older state, and so the dynamics there are going to be. I don't need to tell you this. You look at the numbers. I think that's going to be very interesting because historically, the kind of what I've said is like the three-legged stool of how an insurgent progressive can win in a state or in a primary is you need a lot of young people, you need whites with college degrees, and then you need Hispanic voters. Michigan doesn't have that big of a Hispanic voting population. It does have, as you say, have an Arab American population. I think that El Sayed is very much leaning into that, especially when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the war in Iran. I think last week he hit Haley Stevens for voting to continue to send weapons to Israel. Whereas I think Haley Stevens is relying, I guess what you could say, and you covered Michigan politics for a long time, so you know this. I guess you could say the way that Democrats historically win primaries, which is white women in the suburbs, older auto workers and guys on the line, and African American voters, even though the UAW endorsed El Sayed. But like, I mean, those kinds of the traditional groups of people who typically win. That is, to me, I legitimately, that's the one. I have a politics group chat, and I literally had to put a moratorium on Michigan Senate to talk about, because everybody's losing their minds on it.
They are. It's crazy out there on Blue Sky in particular.
Yeah, I just have no idea how it's going to shake out. I think that obviously Haley Stevens is getting a lot of outside money, particularly a lot of money from AIPAC. But I think that's only half the story. The other half of the story is that a lot of local officials have endorsed her. Dana Nessels endorsed her. Former Senator Debbie Stabenow endorsed her. Currently retiring Senator Gary Peters has endorsed her. But what's interesting is, and I don't need to tell you this, is that Gretchen Whitmer stayed out of it.
Yes, but I don't know if you saw a story in the Detroit News yesterday.
I saw that.
Hinting that she might jump in because she does not like the online discourse she's been seeing. And that could make a difference with independent voters if the polling is correct. So that was interesting discussion.
She's still decently popular, from what I understand. Looking at her numbers,
she's very popular. And even though I think she has lost some of the shine with some of the progressive base, she is still the leader of the party in Michigan. And we saw she had vowed to stay out of the 2020 presidential primary. But when she jumped in for Joe Biden, everybody jumped in, and that was a real decisive moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But as and I also don't need to tell you, Senator Alyssa Slotkin has been conspicuously quiet in the state. I actually think that's kind of smart, because either way, she's going to have to be working with one of them.
Right. And so let's face it, she knows that she might have to face a primary her next time around.
Absolutely, though I think Slotkin has played a little bit more intelligently. She voted to withhold arms to Israel on Senator Sanders' amendment. She has, I think, closer ties to the Arab American community. She made more, I guess you could say, clandestine outreach to them during the 2024 campaign, which is more than I can say for Kamala Harris. So it very much is. Again, I know. I the only way I can characterize that race is it's a jump ball.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and especially because we're so deep into the primary season, the vast majority of states have already voted. All eyes are on Michigan, so I think we may have lost Eric for a second.
It always comes down to Michigan.
Yeah.
Can you give me?
Yeah. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, we're good.
Great.
We're good. Yeah.
Now, I have to say, that was an amazing Bernie Sanders impression you did. No, really, top notch. Are there any others that you have in your back pocket? Because you're around these guys.
Oh man, I could do a pretty, I could do. Let me think. I'm gonna try to do this. Well, no, okay. So this is my Hakeem Jeffries one.
Okay.
Most Democrats are going to continue to work on behalf of the American people. House Republicans and the Chaos Caucus are not working for us. But, I mean, if you, God, I mean, I could maybe do, I used to be able to do, well, we are going to repeal every word of Obamacare. And remember, it was the Democrats. It wasn't the Republicans like Ted Cruz who got rid of Obama, who shut down the government. It was the Democrats who shut down. So I used to be able to do a really, really good Ted Cruz impersonation back in the day. I used to be able to do a really good Lindsey Graham impersonation. But we're focused right now on keeping Israel safe, but and focus on Iran and focus on making sure Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I will say this: one time my mom was on Capitol Hill to visit me. I took her to work with me one day. Take your mom to work day, and I'm in the basement with her, and then she sees Lindsey Graham, and he's bolting past her, and she's like, and my mom's a Democrat. She's like, "That's Lindsey Graham." He's like, "Hi, how you doing? I can't talk right now, but I'll talk to you later." And so he gets into the elevator, and then when he's out of earshot, my mom was like, "I can't stand his ass, but he's so nice." And I was like, "Yeah, that was the case with Lindsey. He could be a jerk on television, but I always got along with him." I could do that. I could also do, here's what we're gonna do. If we're gonna do a Barack Obama impersonation, you gotta kind of have that cadence. But I mean, I could do that all day. I could do it all day. I mean, that was just something I learned because I used to have to watch a lot of footage of a lot of these things. So I just kind of had to. Yeah. I do a terrible Trump impersonation. I'm not even gonna try doing that. Yeah.
Fair enough. There are many out there. Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, because you cover politics for The Independent, which is a British paper.
Yeah.
Sometimes it helps to cover what's going on in the U.S. with a little more detachment. Obviously, you're an American, but the perspective of what your audience wants is probably different than an American audience. And I'm wondering if that gives you a little different perspective on things.
I think it does. I think it's important for me to recognize that, as a Yank, what is interesting to me isn't as interesting to a lot of other people. I think that I do kind of have to, with all due respect to my British colleagues, I think a lot of them are like, well, in America, you guys have gone and said, I'm like, look at your politics, you guys are like on what, your 7th prime minister in the past decade. Andy Burnham just became prime minister this week. I think I think that you really do, I think as an American, you realize that for better or for worse, we still are the indispensable nation. We are what, Lincoln called the last best hope of all freedom-loving peoples. And I think that more than anything, look, I've been at the Indian now for 5 years. God help me, they haven't fired me yet. I think it's been fascinating about like just kind of explaining what's going on in America, and I think why it's important, and why what you see on the television isn't always, or the telly as they call it, why it isn't always the most important thing going on, or why the people who are often the loudest are not the most important people in the room. And I think that really, I think having that context and recognizing that not everybody's as rooted and steeped in this as I am, I think it's important in explaining that, there are all these larger structural issues, but I think also one of the joys of it is recognizing, and I hope they agree with me, is you realize that what's going on in the United States is not all that different from what's happening in the United Kingdom or what's happening in Germany or what's happening in France, because we're seeing consistently right-wing populist nationalist parties popping up everywhere. And then, but ironically enough, Spain won the World Cup this weekend. They're actually kind of a country that's pushed back the far right, and they kind of have a left-leaning government. Which 500 years ago, if you said that Spain would have an anti-colonial government, and they'd be like, right. But so I think that's also part of it, is recognizing that, as I think explaining to the rest of the world that, look, it's easy to pick on America, but it's important to see that what's going on here is happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the bigger stories that you will be following in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big one, they have to have the war is back on. The war in Iran is back on. And whether Congress actually does anything to rein in the president. They're about to go on recess next week. So we'll see if they actually try to have a vote. I think the other thing that's going to be really important to me is seeing, believe it or not, Trump's approval ratings were actually going up for a little bit when the ceasefire began, because gas prices were going down. He fired Kristi Noem, so that wasn't in the, so ICE wasn't always on the front page. Now we're seeing it feels very much like January through March of earlier this year. ICE is shooting people in the streets again. Gas prices are going up. Cost of living is going up, and I'm really interested to see what Republicans have to actually sell, because they haven't really done that much to deal with the cost of living crisis. And it was funny. I remember there was a saying in 2024. I think it was David Frum or someone said, like, if the liberals don't get control of the border, America's going to start trusting the right and Trump to control the border. And I think in the same way, Americans are seeing that Trump isn't keeping the cost of living down. And they already voted out the liberals in 2024. So do they give the progressives, do they give the lefties a chance? I think that's what I'm also going to be seeing. Again, I think the other one that I'm really going to be seeing is I'm really curious to see how women vote and what are going to be the top issues for women. Obviously, we're 4 years removed from the Dobbs decision, but I think that abortion still very much plays a role, though it's not on the television as much. It's not on the TV ads as much. It still is a very, very big role. I think if there's one state I could really go sicko mode on and focus on, it's not Michigan. I promise it's not Michigan. It would actually be Georgia. I think that Georgia's the state to look at, just because you have a governor's race, you have a Senate race, you have potential state legislature on the line. Also because of the death of the Voting Rights Act, if Republicans hold the legislature in Georgia, this year they will get to redraw the map, the congressional map. So Georgia is the state, I would argue, is the most important state to watch. This coming election. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've seen Jon Ossoff. It seems to have a viral video every day. But he had a really interesting exchange with Hegseth at the hearing yesterday. We can go to that.
Iran will never have a nuclear
weapon. Mr. Secretary, early in the conflict, day 3, you said one of those core objectives was to, quote, destroy the missile threat. And as you restated on day 5, to, quote, obliterate Iran's missiles and drones. Those were clearly and repeatedly stated core objectives of the campaign, which 4 months ago you declared had been completed victoriously with every single objective achieved. Were those objectives achieved 4 months ago?
No one ever stated that every single missile was gone. Ultimately, combat ineffective means they're not able to dig them out of their UGFs and shoot at us.
Had the missile threat
It doesn't mean they don't have
defeated
underground
4 months
facilities
ago?
where they put missiles in them and hold on to them because they're the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. So we never expected they would stop having capabilities to shoot. The question is at scale against an opponent like the United States of America, which went toe-to-toe with them, and Iran couldn't.
You stated on March 8th, day 9 of the war, on 60 Minutes, you assured the American people of Iranian surrender. Does that remain your prediction?
Ultimately, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon to threaten the United States of America. That has been the objective, and it remains so.
So just to review, you will not answer whether your statement made on the 14th day of the war that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective was a truthful statement to the American people as you sit here and ask for tens of billions more
The
for
the conflict.
senator's time has
Had a
expired.
historic and effective military campaign against the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Won't
and
answer
will
the
ensure
question.
they never
Senator
get a nuclear weapon,
Peters
Senator.
is recognized.
Yeah,
These videos are like catnip for
they
Democrats.
are.
They love it. Do you think the Ossoff 28 energy is real?
That's a real open question. I mean, because if you were to ask him, hey, are you running in 2028? He can't say yes because he's running for re-election in Georgia. But like, I mean, if you were to ask, I mean, I think there are so many factors. But I mean, let's address what we're really talking about. The last two presidents we've had were in their late 70s, early 80s. And I think that there is, so when you have a relatively young, telegenic politician, particularly a man, who can string together a sentence without trailing off like Trump does or mumbling like Joe Biden did, that's going to be a little exciting for some folks. You know, and I also think that it's been a long time since, God, when I would go to rallies in 2024 where Obama was speaking, I would see kids in the rally. I mean, kids like they're in their 20s or 18 or, you know, the voting age, and their jaws would be on the floor, and I'd be like, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen this clip, but like where people are like, where one old NBA player is like, you have no idea how good Tim Duncan was. I kind of want to yell at them. If you think how great this, like how amazing this Speaker Barack Obama is now, you have no idea what it was like to be alive in 2008 and watch that election.
I'm from Chicago, and I compare it to watching Michael Jordan, you know, actually play live.
Yeah, no. It was like you're not going to get it. So I think there's part of that. I think there's kind of that magic of that ability to see a young, telegenic politician who can string together sentences, who, let's be real, is conventionally handsome, conventionally attractive. I think that doesn't hurt him at all. I think all of that helps him. Now, does he do it? Does he run? Or does he feel like, look, because he's likely going to win, does he feel an obligation to stay in Georgia? I know he's got two young kids. That's also a big thing about it. That's also a big factor for him. So I don't know. But what I do think, more than is Jon Ossoff going to run? I think the fact that these clips are going viral, I think, shows what Democratic voters want. They want somebody who can clearly articulate a message counteracting Donald Trump, not just a strongly worded letter, to borrow from Chuck Schumer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Eric, what is the best way that we can find your work?
You can follow me at The Independent. You can sign up for our newsletter, Inside Washington. It's in your inbox every night at 6 p.m. With the latest of the news coming out of Washington. You can also find me on Twitter, X, I don't know what Elon's calling it now, at Eric M. Garcia. You can find that's the same handle over on Blue Sky. And yeah, you could absolutely follow us everywhere. Follow The Independent on all the social media, on all the social medias, and yeah, it'd be great to keep in contact with you. Oh, and for those who want to send tips my way, my signal is emgarcia.85.
Great. Well, Eric, I'd love for us to talk with you again before the midterms, because you do such incredible work, and it's been great to actually meet you in person.
Absolutely,
Sort of.
Yes, hell yeah.
Thank you for joining us today, all of you as well.
Thank you.